In September 2020, devastating wildfires burned nearly 1 million acres across Oregon. During the removal of hazardous trees and debris following the fire, archaeologists and tribal monitors recorded many archaeological sites, including culturally modified trees, or CMTs. Several CMTs could not be avoided during the hazardous tree removal efforts and were adversely affected. As part of the mitigation for these impacts, this video, along with additional training materials, was developed with the assistance of Oregon tribes and federal and state agencies. CMTs are unique because though they may have been created in the distant past, they're living, growing cultural resources that are still being created today. Increasing awareness about these trees is important as we face more frequent fires and increased development. This video highlights the cultural importance of these resources and provides guidance on how to identify, record, and protect CMTs. Trees deliberately altered by humans are known as CMTs. Indigenous people create and continue to use CMTs for many purposes, both today and in the past. Examples include peeling pine trees for their edible inner bark or cambium, and to collect their pitch. Trees such as hemlock, cedar, and maple are also peeled for materials to make basketry, clothing, or other forms of construction. Some trees have their trunks and branches trained or altered to mark an important location or provide direction. Not all CMTs are indigenous in origin. Different groups modified trees as needed. Some are marked with blazes or engraved with letters, designs, or other markings to indicate trails, property, or events, while other culturally modified trees are found next to old roads or railroads to hold telegraph lines or other utilities.
In the Cascade Range, where the trees are fairly old, they're like over 500 years old. There's been different time frames of when they were peeled. So we have some ancestral ones that are fairly old. Today we continue to peel the cedars for the bark for different cultural purposes. When we come out and peel the tree, that tree to us is sacrificing itself for what we're taking from it. So we're always kind of give thanks to the trees and stuff when we're gathering. And so we're very respectful to the trees, and the reason that we only take a piece off is to make sure the tree lives and survives. And so we want to see these trees become very old. So I think that's just part of the respecting the tree and caring for the tree. And then later, as it gets older, some of the trees were traditionally used like for the plank boards, for the plank houses, and big old trees for the making of the canoes and things like that.
So this is a western red cedar. This was peeled just a few years ago. From my understanding, was peeled for baskets was the main purpose for this one. Around us is a bunch of peeled trees, and they're all about roughly the same amount of diameter has been removed from the tree. And that's because you don't want to harvest too much at one time, so you actually put that tree at greater risk of actually getting infected and dying from diseases. By spreading out, by doing a little bit at a time, the tree will heal over, and maybe in 50 years you can come back and do another peel. So you're really looking at that longevity tree by tree, a little bit by little bit.
And it's a lot of effort. We use red cedar bark for everything: dresses, skirts, beds, houses. Just everything. Cedar is considered a sacred tree, and we never waste any of it.
All of our cultural use plants were modified, just not as visible. And so you don't have that easy to tell scar, but you come across the patch and you're like, wow, this is a really good patch of hazel or berries. And that's usually because it was culturally modified. Coming across the culturally modified cedar, I don't focus as much on the cedar as what's around it. Like we got here and there's wild blueberries, there's this flat area with a view of the mountain, good for camps. You have the creek right next to us. You got the skunk cabbage, which pairs well with lining the buckets you'd make. So it's just kind of like an indicator when I see a culturally modified tree of like, why this area, there's something in this area that's important and our tribal members used.
There is something I think that's universal in seeing a tree that's tied to your culture as a marker on the landscape. And in some ways, I think like seeing it recognized, it legitimizes your experience. It legitimizes your story beyond just what you've been told by your elders or your ancestors or your grandparents. Just overall, it helps broaden our understanding of the history of this place. For almost a century, the Willamette River was used as this corridor to move logs to and from mills. This is a large Douglas fir tree, and it's one of the Willamette River cable trees. And it's got this big scar from a steel cable that would have been wrapped around, and it held these giant log rafts. Just the amount of timber that was coming out of the upcountry and then down into this river, it filled the river with these log rafts. Depending on the flow of the river, like here in the springtime when the river's moving pretty fast, you would want to secure those logs. And so they'd look for big trees on the riverbank to anchor those log rafts.
So how do we identify and record CMTs? Remember, archaeological sites are protected under state and federal law, so planning and coordination are key. Prior to conducting work that may impact trees, be sure to contact the agency archaeologist, landowner, tribal partners, and/or the State Historic Preservation Office to determine if any recorded CMTs are in the area. Be on the lookout for CMTs, especially in locations with ponderosa pine, cedar, and hemlock, as these species are frequently used and modified. Often CMTs are found in groups. Be sure to examine adjacent trees for similar modifications. Storms, natural or mechanical injuries, or animals may also create trees that appear to have been modified by humans. Knowing this, how can we tell if a tree is really a CMT? Culturally modified trees in good condition usually exhibit cut marks or hatches at the bottom of the scar where it was cut with an axe, chisel, or other tool. Keep in mind that the hatch may be difficult to see if the tree is in poor condition or if it has been burned. If the hatch marks are not visible, the shape of the modification can also be used to identify a CMT. Bark stripped trees will have a scar that's either long and tapered, triangular, or may be rectangular in shape.
So this tree has several characteristics that are diagnostic of culturally modified trees. It has a well-defined base and a well-defined top, parallel sides or to contracting sides. Also, base of the peel is about knee height. These were typically started to be peeled about knee to chest height. On the scar face, we can see several cut marks on the exposed wood. This was likely from coming back to this tree later after having already peeled the bark and to either collect some kindling or to open up the tree a bit more to collect sap. With these CMTs, they're typically cut at the bottom and then peeled up, which caused either a rectangular peel or a triangular peel. So this culturally modified tree is a survey boundary tree. This tree would be considered of the historic era because they had modified it during the original survey. When the surveys were coming through this area, they chopped into the tree, exposing the wood face, and had carved in the coordinates of where this tree was at. This tree's been burnt, but you can still make out the S9 for section 9 that this tree is denoting.
The following example demonstrates how to record modifications on a peeled tree. You can use a similar approach for recording other types of CMTs. If you think you've found a culturally modified tree, we recommend recording the following information. Look for a pronounced hatch mark or peel. If the tree is adjacent to a roadway, consider the location of the scar and if it may represent injury from a vehicle. If you determine that the tree is likely a CMT, record the species and overall condition. Is the tree living? Does it have a green canopy? Has the tree been burned? Walk around the tree to determine if it has multiple modifications or scars that need to be recorded. Number each scar in your notes so you can collect the following information for each one. Use a device with GPS capabilities to record the location of the tree. Note the coordinate system, such as UTMs or latitude and longitude, so the tree can be relocated by other researchers. Now it's time to record the scar. Using a tape measure, measure the distance from the base of the scar to the top of the peel. Be sure to note if the scar is incomplete or damaged. Then record the width at the widest point by placing the edge of the tape within the scar and measuring to the opposite side. Again, note any damage or unique features of the scar. Next, using the tape placed perpendicular to the scar and trunk, record the depth. The depth of the scar will vary depending on the age of the tree. Usually, older scars will be deeper as the tree is healed over the original peel. If the tree has been recently peeled, you may not be able to collect an accurate scar depth. It's also important to record the base of the scar relative to the ground. Keep in mind that in some cases, due to leaf litter, slope, or purpose of the original peel, the scar may extend to the ground surface. Next, you will want to record or estimate the circumference of the tree to calculate size and relative age. Do this by using a flexible measuring tape as shown. If you don't have a flexible tape, use a piece of flagging or string that you can then measure. This will allow you to calculate the diameter at breast height, or DBH, which is the circumference of the tree divided by 3.14. The DBH will allow you to determine the relative age of the tree. Document the tree using photographs, preferably with a scale. Take photos of the full scar, showing the base of the tree to the top of the peel. Using a scale, take a close-up of the scar. Be sure to photograph any hatch marks or other unique features you observe. A photograph of any healed portions of the scar and scar depth are also useful to document. Make sure to take an overview photo of the entire tree and its setting. This also makes it easier to relocate the tree in the future and to show change to the site through time. The direction or orientation of the scar can also provide information about the tree and its use. If you have a compass, record the orientation of the scar. If you do not have a compass, estimate generally if the scar is on the north, south, east, or west side of the tree. For trees that have multiple scars, be sure to record each location separately. After recording the CMT, be sure to submit the information to your agency archaeologist and the State Historic Preservation Office. Depending on the agency, there may be a specific CMT site form to fill out. Documenting the CMT with these agencies will ensure that the tree is recorded and impacts to the resource can be avoided or minimized for future projects. As with all archaeological resources, location and site information of CMTs is confidential and should only be shared with trained professionals. The ODOT and FEMA hazardous tree and debris removal project from the 2020 wildfires employed various treatment measures for burned CMTs. The following examples were used by the archaeological and tribal monitors only after consultation with tribes and agencies for this project alone, and may vary from the following examples. Protect the CMT during felling operations by adequately flagging and buffering the resource. This ensures that operators avoid the tree and fell away from the site.
For treatment purposes on this tree, even though it has been burnt, enough of it is structurally sound and alive that it was decided that we could leave this one standing. To protect it, we had it flagged off and we monitored and felled trees away from this one to make sure that no felled trees were felled into this one, accidentally causing more damage. Here's an example of a treatment method that we employed. This tree was determined to be a hazard to the road. To address that, the tree was topped above the scar, leaving the cultural resource intact. The portion of the tree that was cut was left in place where it had fell per the request of the tribes.
So we all have special places in our own mental maps, and those often are tied to stories or experiences or really important events to us. To me, a place is a space that has that deep significance. And that can be just very individual, or it could be much, much bigger.
Coming up to huckleberries is just part of the yearly round. Like you get to August, September, and it's time to go up and get huckleberries. And it's setting those kind of cycles, and that's just still how we continue our way of life. It's really important to keep them because as tribal members, being able to go there and see these peeled cedars, it's that connection to our ancestors in this land.
We maintain a database in the same way that the State Historic Preservation Office maintains a database of all of our culturally significant places. And that includes not just archaeological sites and historic properties, but also gathering places, traditional cultural properties. When our forestry department or our tribal members tell us that they've encountered a culturally modified tree or they know of a gathering place, we document that as a culturally significant place in our traditional cultural landscapes database. Many of the resources that the tribes used here locally were these more soft resources. They're not the stones and things that everybody looks around as archaeological resources. They see arrowheads or flakes and bowls on the ground. Most of the tools and technologies that were used here locally were sedge, were hazel, were willow, were cedar, and so they don't preserve in the archaeological records. So maintaining a record of these resources today shows the history and connection with people to the landscape, and a landscape that has changed dramatically over the last 170 years. And so we need to maintain a record of that and an acknowledgement of that connection to place and to landscape.
We hope this video has highlighted a unique cultural resource and offered how to identify, record, and treat culturally modified trees. CMTs do not stand alone in the forest, but are part of a larger ecosystem that ties us to our past and remains integral to many cultures today. We encourage those who watch this video to incorporate this training into future projects that may impact culturally modified trees.